1.
Red flag. Red flag's to slow down.
What? The checkered flag is waiting.
I can see our Checkered Flag podcast being quite spicy.
5 Live's Checkered Flag podcast.
62 racing laps of the Marina Bay Street Circuit are complete, and it was Lando Norris who reigned victorious here in Singapore. He stood on the top step of the podium, and alongside him was his title rival Max Verstappen, and Oscar Piastri completed the podium. I'm Rosanna Tennant, and I'm joined by our lead commentator Harry Benjamin and Formula E McLaren driver Sam Bird, and we are going to talk through everything we've seen under the lights here in Singapore. Harry, you said in commentary that it was a bit of a slow burn, the Singapore Grand Prix. What did you mean by that?
I think we all know what I meant by that. It's a polite way of saying there's not that much happening, because Lando Norris was utterly dominant. He got a good start off the line, better than Max Verstappen, and then just pulled away. Initially, it wasn't by much, but as soon as he was told to get a 5-second gap, ideally, to Verstappen, he did that instantly. And by the end, finishing over 20 seconds clear of Max Verstappen, and that was him easing off in the last couple of laps. It was at one stage nearly around 30 seconds, the gap between himself and Max Verstappen. That would have been the largest margin of a race victory we've seen all season. That's why it was a bit of a slow burn, because really nobody could catch Norris, and those behind were all sort of playing chicken with the tyres and who was going to pit first, and nobody really wanted to come in, because what if we got a safety car? Statistically there was a 100% chance, and that means, of course, did we get a safety car? Absolutely not. So that was why I called it a slow burn, and I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think it's fair to stand by that. Sam, much has been made of Lando Norris's starts of late. He's had a few tricky starts to Grand Prix this season, and maybe some race wins have therefore got away from him, but he was absolutely stellar right off the line this evening. And then how impressed were you with the way he managed that race? And I feel there was so much more in the tank, don't you?
Yeah, even though there was a short run to turn one, I think he had Max and the Mercedes covered off. I think his launch was very, very strong. And from there on, Rosanna, he just disappeared, didn't he? I mean, really, really disappeared. It's remarkable to think that 18 months ago, this team was at the back of the grid, and now they are not just at the front of the grid, but they're leading races, halfway through races, by 30 seconds. It's remarkable. He
did, though, Sam, put us on the edge of our seats.
Yeah, I was terrified.
I was terrified. He got
twice.
So close to the wall. I think it was turn 10, wasn't it? With the old Singapore sling chicane, and where we saw Russell crash out last year fighting. And indeed, last year, Norris kissed the wall there as well. Even with that margin, still pushing.
It was that quick. He was already in October, and he didn't need to push that quick, that hard. I've actually just seen a quote saying that he wasn't pushing unnecessarily hard. That's just how he was driving. Anyway, he got very close twice, but apart from that, it was pretty plain sailing for Lando Norris today.
Bar the right-hander at turn 14, where he did
bar the right, yeah.
and lose a bit of front wing.
The major lockup. I tell you what, if he'd braked 5 centimetres later, that would have been a front wing change. So I think that he will... he'll be super happy with the work today, but also be mighty relieved that he braked where he did and not any later.
When the radio flashed up and it was, I've just hit the wall, and I was like, it's Norris, what? I was so confused. I was like, he's out front, he's having an easy time of it almost. I thought it was concentration, but actually it was, a lack of concentration, but actually it was pushing hard, wasn't it?
Well, it had us all panicking as well, because no one had seen it, and it felt like it took ages for any kind of for replay to come through, and then it was 3 laps after we actually saw what happened to Norris. But you know what, that fighting back from what ended up being a bit of a tough weekend in Baku with that poor qualifying effort, which was as a result of being caught out by the yellow flag, so not a lack of pace issue for Lando Norris in Baku, but had a mission on his hands to then make an impact. He came here and did everything he needed to do. Almost got the Grand Slam with the fastest lap point to boot. Ricciardo took that away from him, but you couldn't have really asked much more from Lando Norris this evening.
No, I mean, really, really impressive result, and obviously Oscar Piastri bringing home the final spot on the podium for McLaren. They continue to pull away from the field in the Constructors' Championship. Going back to the little wall incident with Lando Norris. I mean, those tyres, by that point, they were 28 laps old. By this point, there's less rubber on the tyre. You're probably through to a slightly harder surface on the tyre, so it's really easy to do, especially at that corner, which is a downhill braking zone on a street circuit. It's, you know, even if he wasn't pushing, it's still really, really easy to do.
Lando Norris then closing the gap with this performance to 52 points in the driver's standings. He now has 279 points to Max Verstappen's 331. He almost did, as Harry said, everything he needed to do, but obviously missing out on that fastest lap point. Let's hear from Lando Norris. It was a great drive, a commanding performance, but I wanted to find out how much he was actually pushing out there on the track.
I mean, the first stint I wasn't managing at all, as you could probably tell, because I almost crashed. But second stint, I took it a lot more easy. I mean, there was traffic and things like that. It was a lot easier to make mistakes. So I had my gap, I had my lead, I had my cushion, and I could manage from there. But I mean, the first stint, I was pushing because I could create a big gap, and while the pace was there, I just wanted to make it nice and easy for myself.
How are you going to spend the rest of the break? Obviously, we've got a few weeks now. How are you going to spend the break to make sure that you're in a better position come the back end of the season now?
I mean, I've still got, there's a good amount of preparation to be done for the next few races. But there are three fun ones, three races that I enjoy a lot. But then it's quite a good stretch, to the end of the year. So, I mean, for myself, but also for the whole team, I guess it's a good time for us to all recover once again, similar to the summer holiday. Get a little bit of time at home, chill out, distract myself from racing. I feel like I've been performing extremely well, so in a way I don't want to take a break, but at the same time I still need it. Just get a good amount of recovery in and prepare well, and that's all I can do.
That was Lando Norris talking to me a little earlier on. And Harry, what does this mean then for the rest of the season and Lando Norris's campaign to take his first World Drivers' title?
Well, he's still got a very steep hill to climb, because the stat is, and because I will not take any claim over this, I've completely taken this off of the virtual stat man. Daniel Ricciardo's fastest lap means that Max Verstappen is guaranteed the title if he finishes second to Norris in every remaining Grand Prix and sprint, regardless of the fastest lap bonus point. So it makes life easier for Max Verstappen, that's for sure. He has the advantage, 52 points, and maybe we'll dive into this a little bit deeper. It's RB, the effective sister junior team of Red Bull, playing a part in Red Bull's championship challenge. I think that will ruffle a few feathers at McLaren.
Yeah, well, McLaren still have the lead of the Constructors' Championship, 516 points to Red Bull's 475. So they are motoring away in that particular championship. But of course, most people talk about the Drivers' Championship. But in this particular pit lane, obviously the Constructors is more important to the team because that means money. So let's talk about Max Verstappen's weekend then, because I don't know about you, but on Thursday, I sort of believed what he was saying when he said, he was targeting Q3, but let's see where we end up. Well, it was P2 both in qualifying and on race day, so I feel that was really the best they could have done this weekend with Max Verstappen.
Yeah, damage limitation for Red Bull and for Max Verstappen, especially in his hunt to be crowned a four-time World Drivers' Champion. He couldn't have done any more, to be honest, Rosanna. He didn't have the pace in the car, but he executed what was a flawless race, and he was a very lonely second place in the end. But I think he'll come away from this one happy with what he's been able to achieve, considering the pace deficit that he had to McLaren.
Yeah, it was a bit of a lonely, anonymous race, really, for Max Verstappen, wasn't it, Harry? Not able to make inroads at all. And what does that say about where the Red Bull is? They are desperately in need of some upgrades, aren't they?
They are, but we're getting into that closing stage of the season.
This is P2, isn't it?
This is P2.
He still finished P2. I'm talking like he finished sort of P22.
But you know what? They almost have that mindset, though. Verstappen almost has that mindset, doesn't he? If he's not winning, then what's the point? Finishing over 20 seconds behind McLaren, who were last at the start of last year, their rate of improvement is massive. And now it's interesting because Red Bull have been one of the teams who've kind of been campaigning against McLaren for this mini DRS flexi wing that they've had. And that, I think, is really interesting because it almost shows that Red Bull are a bit distracted because McLaren are doing so well and they're not focusing on internally where they need to be. They've clearly got car issues. This was always going to be a bogey track for Red Bull, regardless of how they've done over the last 7 races. So it's a good recovery for Max Verstappen. But when you look at where Perez is, down in 10th, and you look at the weekend that Perez had before in Baku, the inconsistency is so bizarre, Sam, I think. And it just makes me wonder, is Verstappen just out-driving that Red Bull? And really, the actual pace of the car is kind of maybe whereabouts Perez is.
I've been thinking about this for the last hour or so. I know, genuinely.
You're going to say 18
genuinely.
months.
No.
He's been writing a book.
We did a pod back in, I think it was January, February time, before the season started, when all the things were going on with regards to Christian Horner and they were just about to do their car launch, and we did a pod and we were saying about what we think might happen with Red Bull going forward. Now, they look like they're still going to probably win the Drivers' Championship unless he has a DNF or has some kind of disasters and Lando wins everything. That's fine. They're going to win this one, and they should have done. But you can see that the pace is falling away. They've lost key individuals. Adrian Newey's going. It's not quite as great as it was. And is this the start of a new regime? Is McLaren going to be the new dominant force in Formula One for the next 2-3 years until we get the next homologation of cars? It's interesting how it is shifting. This momentum from Red Bull is shifting in a different direction.
Isn't it weird how it then leads to more domination, and we're looking at almost nearly 30-second leads of the race already, and they've only just started leading the way, McLaren.
Yeah, this is the thing. We can't get it right. We want to see a fight at the front, but then it just swings massively in the other direction. Look, I think Norris is being quick out the blocks from FP1. He topped almost every single session this weekend, bar one practice session. He's clearly had an affinity around this streets. Piastri hasn't been as quick as him all weekend long, so to still get on the podium is great stuff for McLaren, and that underlines how fast inherently that car is. But for Red Bull, they have got some... You know what, they want to close the chapter on this year, I'm sure of it. They'll want to try and take the Drivers' Championship because that's all Red Bull really care about. They've never really cared about the Constructors. They've only really cared about the Drivers' Championship. That's what they celebrate the most in a kind of opposition way to all the other teams. But they've lost Adrian Newey. Jonathan Wheatley's gone. They've had a lot of off-track... Sorry. They've had a lot of off-track nonsense going on, of course, at the start of the year, and that continues to rumble on. Max Verstappen, the rumour of where he will go, despite having a contract. Mercedes is sniffing around, maybe now Aston Martin. There's so much noise that I think it is affecting the team as a whole, and the fact that they clearly have made a step backwards in where the performance of the car is. And they are limping home to the end of the year.
Ooh, that's a big call. Okay, well, we are expecting upgrades. We are expecting some upgrades, but as you'll hear, Max Verstappen not sure when they're going to come. I started by asking Verstappen in the media pen how he reflected on the weekend as a whole.
I mean, positive. It could have been way worse as well. I think how we started. We know that this track is not really good for us, but to come out of it in P2, I think is still a very good result.
I know there are upgrades pending for the US Grand Prix. Are you a little bit worried about the fact that the team can't get on top of the car and sort it out for you? I know P2 today, but when you step back.
I mean, we're trying to improve the situation quickly. I think we know where we have to work on, and now it just depends on when it arrives to the car.
That was Max Verstappen, P2 for the Singapore Grand Prix for him. And as you said, Harry, they might limp home to the end of the season. Max Verstappen not even sure when the bits and pieces that they're obviously working on for the car are going to be put on it. But it's crucial that they deliver them pretty soon so that he can take this fight right to the end if he needs to against Lando Norris and take the title.
Yeah, absolutely. But also now teams are in full flow thinking about 2025, and as soon as 2025 starts, they'll be thinking about 2026. So they're not going to be putting massive effort into the current car right now, are they, Sam?
No, look, McLaren have a now very healthy gap in the Constructors' Championship, and I can only see it really going in their direction, bar a disaster. Same thing kind of goes for the drivers. I think that Max Verstappen has it covered off, regardless of whether they ever put another upgrade on that car or not. I think that it's probably too much of a tall order for Lando to win every single Grand Prix until the end of the year. I'd certainly like to see it, but I think it's a tall order. I'm not sure what happens though with Red Bull going forwards, to be honest. For next year, how are they going to rebuild?
Isn't that crazy though, saying how are they going to rebuild? They've just finished P2 on the road with Max Verstappen and he's leading the championship. I mean, it just shows how dominant they were at the start of this season and how suddenly it has just fallen off a cliff.
Yeah, I don't mean that in any bad way. We're just so used to them dominating, Rosanna. They've had the best designer of probably Formula One's history. They've had the best driver and they've had the best car, and they don't have the best car anymore. They've lost that designer, so they've lost 2 out of 3 of those key essential items from the team. So how do they go about rebuilding? Do they need to invest in more key personnel? Do they need to try and nab some designers from other teams, go down a different route with regards to their philosophy? And you know, the team has been under a little bit of a cloud this year, and I think that regardless of the Drivers' Championship that they probably will win, I think that it will be a rebuilding off-season for the team.
Definitely one to watch, the 2025 season, for many reasons, I think. Let's move things on then to our third place finisher, Oscar Piastri, who had a difficult day in qualifying and probably wasn't starting where he should have. I would imagine he would have preferred a front row start or a P3 start, and perhaps that's where the team thought he should have started. But what do you make of the way he got the moves done this evening, Harry? It was pretty good, wasn't it? He's a great overtaker, Oscar Piastri.
We love an Oscar Piastri overtake, and he set them up lovely. Couple of moves down into turn 7, the left-hander, round the outside, oh so close to wheel-to-wheel contact with George Russell's Mercedes. It was just so good to watch off the back of that spectacular move for the lead last week out in Azerbaijan. Piastri, didn't have the outright one-lap pace compared to Lando Norris, although I think a mistake in qualifying really prevented him from starting on the front row. It could have been, I think, a 1-2 for McLaren if Piastri had started on the front row. He didn't have a good lap in the final run of Q3, and if you take his Q2 lap, he would have been on the front row if that lap had stood the same time in the following session. So, look, clearly that was a bit of an issue on Piastri's part, but another podium, notches up. He's within touching distance of Charles Leclerc's third place in the Drivers' Championship. Another great race. McLaren are in such a good place right now. I know we were bigging up, but how's it going to be in McLaren team orders? Is there going to be anarchy? Are the drivers not going to get on? But you know what? It's working out for them very nicely indeed. And it was a 20-point gap after Baku, and now it's over 40 points. They've straight away doubled it at the next race because they've got 2 cars in the hunt at every Grand Prix now. And I think, as Sam said a little earlier, it is going to be McLaren's to lose.
Yeah, there's a lot of consistency when it comes to McLaren at the moment. Let's listen to what Oscar Piastri had to say to me in the media pen earlier on, and I asked him if the result in the Grand Prix made up for that difficult qualifying session yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always nice to walk away with a podium. I think that was the most we could have done. It's not the easiest track to overtake, obviously, but the pace was really strong. The car was incredible all weekend, and didn't maximise it in quali yesterday, so I'm glad that I could fight my way back a bit today. Couple of nice moves, and to walk away with the trophy is always fun.
The car works on a street circuit like Singapore now. We know it works on a street circuit like Baku. We've got some different types of tracks coming up now. How confident are you that both you and Lando can be right at the front, right to the end of the season now for that championship?
Very confident. I think we've proven to ourselves and to everyone that our car is consistently very quick on every kind of track now. So, we expected this to be a really strong weekend for us, but I don't expect the others to be weak. So let's see. There's a bit of a break now for everyone to kind of digest and go again for the last few races of the year. But no, I think we're as confident as ever.
So that was Oscar Piastri completing the podium for the Singapore Grand Prix. And behind him, it was George Russell, the first Mercedes to take the checkered flag. And Charles Leclerc between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, P5 and P6 for those drivers, respectively. And actually, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, they weren't in the media pen. And Mercedes sent a message saying that they weren't going to be coming to the media pen because they were needing to recover from the exertions of this evening's race. It was incredibly humid this evening. And I could see a lot of the drivers looking pretty tired, pretty exhausted, but Mercedes not sending George Russell or Lewis Hamilton to the media pen. And I've spoken with the FIA. There's no penalty for that. They've been dispensed. That's what the FIA told me. So all fine, and hopefully they will be all fine and will recover well. So yes, P4 for George Russell, P5 for Leclerc, P6 for Hamilton, then Carlos Sainz, P7. Quite a good recovery given that he put it in the wall in qualifying, but difficult for Ferrari overall, I think, given it was a weekend. We thought they would be challenging for P1 in both quali and race.
Yeah, I think Ferrari missed the trick this weekend. They could have been nip and tuck, probably a little bit behind McLaren. I don't think either Ferrari had the pace to beat Lando Norris, but perhaps at least one Ferrari could have been on the podium had qualifying gone well.
I'm just happy that I called it before the race, Harry. I don't know whether you remember that far back a couple of hours ago.
I can't remember 15 minutes
by
ago.
The end of the race, Ferrari are going to be in the mix with Mercedes, and that's exactly the battle that panned out. And it was a battle of strategy with the tyres. You saw Lewis on the softs at the beginning, pitting early and then really struggling towards the end for pace. You saw Charles Leclerc pitting later than the two Mercedes cars and really coming after them in the later stages of the race. So that in itself was strategically quite interesting, I suppose. And yeah, Carlos Sainz, another early stopper, suffered with his pace at the end, but brought home a P7.
You know what was really interesting, Rosanna, throughout the weekend, though, particularly when it came to Mercedes, but a lot of the teams, I can't remember a weekend where almost after every session, something has changed within the pecking order. We all thought Ferrari were coming in strong. Mercedes constantly having issues with the tyres, changing from practice session to practice session. Hamilton finally coming good in qualifying, but then really struggling in the race with his tyres. It's a real sort of ebb and flow, and I think a lot of people will be scratching their heads, because while Russell was able to cling on to fourth, it was a decent result for him and Mercedes, considering the Friday that they had, one of their worst Fridays of the year. I still don't believe that they really know how and why they can overcome some of the issues that they had. Sometimes it just works, sometimes it doesn't, and that's a real issue for the teams. I mean, it's sort of great for us because it leads us into the unknown and we don't really know who's where. But it's quite interesting. I've not seen it as heavily anywhere else as we've witnessed it across the weekend in Singapore.
I think Lewis Hamilton might wish he'd started on the medium tyre as well, but maybe he felt he just had to throw the dice and see what would befall him. But there we are. It was P6 for him.
350th Grand Prix that was for Lewis Hamilton. Can you believe that?
Wow. Time flies. I'm sure we celebrate another anniversary of some sort for Lewis Hamilton so often. The seasons are just motoring past. Let's look a little bit further down the top 10 then. Fernando Alonso, P8, ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, P9. Impressive from both of those drivers, because, I don't know, I looked at the starting grid and I thought, are they going to be able to hang on to points-paying positions? And they did. They did a great job of doing that. And Nico Hülkenberg had an absolutely brilliant start as well, didn't he?
He did. He got ahead of Leclerc, up into fifth at one point. P5, started sixth.
P5, great start.
Kept him behind as well.
Yeah.
And
really nice. 6
points finish of the season for the Hulk. First point since Silverstone. Puts himself up into the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. Solid effort.
Just readying himself for the Audi
the back of the grid.
venture. No.
Scoring points while he can.
Oh, don't. Well, Sergio Perez did pick up a solitary point. He finished P10. And Franco Colapinto just outside the points, the only Williams to make it to the checkered flag. He was disappointed, you could tell in the media pen. I think he thought he was on for another points finish. Obviously, so new to Formula One. His teammate Alex Albon retired early on in the race due to a power unit or a cooling issue, and the team are investigating that as we speak. Yuki Tsunoda, Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll, Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, Pierre Gasly started on the soft tyre as well. That didn't go well for the Alpine driver. And then P18, last on the road, Daniel Ricciardo, but he did get the fastest lap, and let's have a listen to what he had to say to me in the media pen earlier on. I asked him how we're describing that Grand Prix.
The Grand Prix itself was, I think, the first in a long time. There was no safety car, so it's one of those ones. Obviously, after qualifying yesterday, we knew we had to take a bit of a risk and maybe get lucky at the right time with strategy. So, but yeah, in the end, obviously, I think we just weren't quick enough. You know, after Friday, we did look good, and then we simply weren't. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't follow too closely Yuki's race, but I know he ended up out of the points as well. So, yeah, maybe as a team, we just didn't quite have the race pace. But yeah, at the end, we were in a bit of no man's land, so the team suggested we could go for fastest lap, and obviously I said, let's do it. So yeah, a little hurrah.
Is it the final hurrah?
Possibly, yeah.
Oh,
so if it is, I guess a nice way to say adios.
Do you find that out tomorrow morning? Like, what's the plan? Are you up early for a meeting?
I don't know.
Do you know it already?
Sure. I'm not too sure what the plan is, but I mean, look, I've obviously got a good idea, so yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
That could have been the last time I interviewed Daniel Ricciardo, guys.
That's sad, isn't it?
It was a bit sad because obviously I did my interview and then he moved around the media pen, and each time it sort of, from my eavesdropping, sounded like he was getting closer and closer to sort of saying what's actually going to happen. But it's just all a bit disappointing. I think actually the media, we actually love talking to Daniel Ricciardo. He's always had a smile on his face. He's always jolly. And so, yeah, you do get to know these guys weekend in, weekend out. So it's a bit sad when someone's career kind of comes to an end. But, you know, the real world's quite fun, isn't it, Sam?
The real world? It's slightly more stressful.
Yeah, I'm sure Daniel Ricciardo will be okay. I'm sure, hopefully he can pay his energy bill.
It's sort of the most official termination of a contract I think we've seen. There's still no official word as we record this, but there have been there was a sort of guests and RB team members forming a guard of honor outside of RB for Ricciardo as he came back, giving him a round of applause, and that included team principal Lauren Mekies. And I mean, they're not applauding a P18 finish with the fastest lap, are they, Sam?
No, I think that's thank you, Daniel, and goodbye. You know, as sad as it is for such a happy, smiley character to be leaving the sport potentially, where there's no word yet, let's remember he's had some amazing times, been in some great cars, won some great races, and he will be able to look back with some amazing memories on what has been an incredible journey of his life over the last sort of 12, 13 years.
You know, over 250 Grand Prix, 8 wins, 3 pole positions, and providing us with some brilliant entertainment on and off track. He's had an absolutely glittering career. It's not been the fairy tale ending. It really went downhill ever since he left Red Bull, but you can't rewrite history, and he will always have those wins to look back on, and will always be respected up and down the paddock. We heard that even from Max Verstappen's referring to him on the team radio and in Verstappen's own interviews after when asked to comment on Daniel Ricciardo. So look, whatever happens to Ricciardo, he's had a brilliant career, and he doesn't want to be finishing P18. He doesn't want to be battling for the lower points paying positions, having come from where he's come from. So whatever he goes on to do next will be, I'm sure, incredibly successful, and we'll follow that with intrigue.
I have a question, Harry. Daniel Ricciardo got the fastest lap. I know how Red Bull might want to argue this. Perhaps, it was his last race, and so that's why RB made him go out and get the fastest lap as a final hurrah. But is it a bit weird that he did it almost to help Max Verstappen? And of course, RB are linked to Red Bull. Is there a little bit of blurring of the lines and the rules there?
Well, look, we don't know that is specifically what was said, but I think it's going to certainly divide opinion. And I think if it is the way we think it panned out, I think it shows how threatened Verstappen and Red Bull feel against Norris. Zach Brown has said he is going to ask questions about this because teams should operate independently. They are all independent teams on the grid, and that is how it should be on a sporting level. That felt like an A and B team, which is not allowed in the rules. They used to be, when it was Toro Rosso. They used to share data. They used to share information, even parts. At one point, the Toro Rosso was actually quicker than the Red Bull back in the late noughties, the early noughties. So I think this is going to divide opinion and ask some questions. RB, part of the reasoning for changing their name almost was to try and separate them from being a Red Bull Junior sister team. But I don't think that was very sporting. Sam, what about you? If it is indeed a message from Red Bull to RB.
Honestly, you say it's not sporting. I think it's using the tools available to you, to be honest. If they've got that tool in their locker, you would want to use it, wouldn't you? If Christian can call down to RB, say, look, we need Daniel to do a pit stop and set fastest lap, they're going to do that. My initial thought was this is Daniel's last Grand Prix. I think I called it to you during commentary. I think this is a final hurrah for Daniel. Go out and set the fastest lap as your final ever lap in Formula One. Go and do a fastest lap so you end on a high. So you can either look at it like that, or you can look at it as they've used Daniel as a tool to take a point away from Lando. Either way, there's a nice story and a controversial one.
Exactly, just how we like to end the podcast. Guys, thank you so much. McLaren Formula E driver Sam Bird and our lead commentator Harry Benjamin helping me, Rosanna Tennant, analyse everything we've seen here in Singapore. Formula One takes a bit of a break now because we've got a few weekends off until the US Grand Prix in Austin, and we're going to be gearing up for that particular Grand Prix with a special Checkered Flag podcast in front of a live audience in downtown Austin on Thursday the 17th of October. Austin fans, claim your seat to the ultimate pit stop at the ultimatepitstopatx.com. No purchase necessary, and it ends on September the 30th at 5 p.m. Central Time. Eligibility restrictions apply. There's a limit of one entry per person, and you can visit the ultimatepitstopatx.com for terms and conditions. But we leave Singapore then with Lando Norris taking home the biggest trophy, and he now trails Max Verstappen by 52 points in the standings. We'll meet again for the US Grand Prix. Sam, Harry, thank you very much. I've been Rosanna Tennant, and this has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.